This is the Humans of Gaming podcast, an open and honest conversation about games, life, and belief.
Hello, this is Jonathan Clausen, Love Thy Nerds podcast producer, here to introduce this episode of Humans of Gaming. Now, usually we have our chief nerds, Drew Dixon and Chris Gwaltney, here to interview a member of the gaming industry. But this week, Drew and our chief resource nerd, April-Lyn, amongst others, were at GenCon 2019 in Indianapolis and recorded some short interviews with a plethora of game developers and designers. In this first episode of interviews from GenCon, we talked to 9 designers, including Rob Davio, Michael Fox, and Zain Memon. The interviews ask the basic questions about the games they are showcasing. But just like on our regular episodes, we like to know the developers a little bit better. What do they hope the players experience or learn from their time with the game? Why do they make games? And how do their personal beliefs influence that passion? For developers like Eric Slauson, the game Tattoo Stories gives people an opportunity to share a piece of art with friends and family without the anxiety that comes from being vulnerable. Tiffany Caires of Habba Games has a passion for bringing people together by publishing games that encourage relationships and social and emotional skills. And Zain Memon from Bombay, India, shares how 3 years of making a political documentary in India led him to create a game that allowed family and friends to have a gaming experience specifically about politics, but hopefully without the toxicity so prevalent in those kinds of conversations. We hope you enjoy these interviews from GenCon. We'll be back next week with more, so be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere you might be listening to the show. Be sure to visit us at lovethynerd.com to find out more about what we are and what we do, and how you can get involved. Enjoy the show.
Drew Dixon here at GenCon with Eric Slauson. Where are you from?
I am coming out of Northern Virginia.
Okay, cool. And how did you get into making games?
Just kind of randomly, a buddy of mine got a game as a gift, and it was a board game we had played before, this like Catan game, and we played it and just like blew our minds, like, what is this? There's not, roll to move and all that kind of stuff. And so after that, we kind of went back and forth every month buying a random game from Amazon, trying to kind of figure out what our tastes were, what we liked. And then like 6 months into that, I was like, I can do this, and tried to design a game. It was terrible. I took some more swings at it, and, here we are.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you still like Settlers of Catan? Because I feel like when people get really into board games, they're really divided about whether or not they like that game. I'm just curious. There's no wrong answer. No. It's a safe place.
I do. I like it. I think it's a cool mix of, I don't mind when there's luck in games, and so there's the whole thief thing. I think that adds a little bit of excitement and stuff. So there's the strategy, and there's bartering between the people, but then there's what's that thief gonna do? You don't know. But I like it. Most of what I play with my group are, lighter things, party things, social things. But when we do strategy things, it's something like a Catan.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you were showing here at GenCon Tattoo Stories. Tell me about Tattoo Stories and what makes it unique.
Yeah, so Tattoo Stories is a drawing party game, and it's unique in that it is one where it works on all ends of the drawing spectrum. So if you're an incredible artist, that's awesome because everybody gets to see your art. If you're a terrible artist, that's awesome because everybody gets to see your art and laugh at it.
I like that. That's me.
And the way the scoring in the game works is basically a customer is going to come into your tattoo parlor and they say, hey, I like these 5 things, and I need you to mix them all up into one tattoo. I like chicken legs and barbed wire and hot air balloons and pizza and a submarine. And so you have to mash all of that up together. And the way the scoring works is the customer gives each card to the person who used that the best in their tattoo. So it doesn't have anything to do with how how beautiful your submarine was. It's like, did you have a funny idea for your submarine? So there's like a pitching aspect to it, something like snake oil or but wait, there's more or something like that. So it's like part drawing, part storytelling, part pitching.
Yeah. And what made you want to make a? Because I might not be seeing them. Like, this is audio, but I don't see any tattoos on you. Are you like a tattoo person? Do you like tattoos?
I love tattoos. I don't have any tattoos.
I love it.
Yeah. But
you have nightmares about like getting a bad tattoo or something. And
yeah, kind of. I have like really bad buyer's remorse about like when I buy like a book or something.
That's why I don't have a tattoo, because I feel like one day, in just a few years, maybe I'll be like, oh, I'm not sure I like that.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, like I can study from afar. I can appreciate it from afar. Like, I love surfing. Surfing's really cool. I have never been surfing. I'll watch it, but I'm scared of sharks and stuff. So
yeah, sure.
I can watch other people do this cool skill.
Yeah, cool. So it was really just, you kind of got the idea and you wanted to make, well, I guess here's a question maybe to get to this another angle. What do you hope players get out of their experience playing Tattoo Stories?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's a part of it that's like really important to me is it gives people an opportunity to make art, which is not something that a lot of people really get to do. And it's because it takes the pressure off of like, oh, my drawing's bad or it's good or whatever. It's more about the concept. And it's working a part of your brain of like, okay, well, how can I mix these concepts together? It gives people an opportunity to share a piece of art, which is like terrifying. You think about like getting called up to the front of the class to do like a math problem or something. People have a lot of anxiety about sharing like writing or art. So this is like a safe space for people to like, work that part of just your soul and your spirit.
Yeah.
So, it's a party game and it's silly, but it really, I have seen so many people sit down and say like, I can't draw, like I'm going to be bad at this. And they're already talking about themselves. And then they, 3 minutes later they show it and everybody just, bursts out laughing and then they pitch it and people are just cracking up the whole time. And so like, just to see them light up and see that they can like create.
That's a really compelling and beautiful idea, because I think like we live in a culture where we're really like reticent to be vulnerable, and like I know a lot of people will probably play this game and it's just like a good laugh for them. Like you could totally play it that way, but it sounds like there's also an opportunity to kind of like let people see something you made, which is kind of a vulnerable moment, which I think leads to perhaps like better relationships and things like that. Is that something you've seen, like experienced around the table when people play your game?
Yeah, for sure. So I've had people who, are a friends group, and then they have, I've been demoing this game for like 2 or 3 years, and people still are like, oh, I remember that tattoo that we drew it, Unpub years ago. But I also have a lot of people who I have just grabbed a group and of 4 strangers, and then like later on I see those 4 strangers playing the same game, and they're like, oh yeah, we just exchanged information after Tattoo Stories, like he made that movie reference and he likes that movie. So I've seen people like make friendships afterwards. But yeah, it's something about opening yourself up and being vulnerable for a minute, but like with laughter on top of it. So
I dig it. Is this your first game? Have you done other games?
I have some other things that are coming out late this year and early next year. This will be my first published game.
Okay. Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really exciting. The Bicycle did an excellent job with it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, this has been great. One last question I like to ask designers is, why do you make games? What drives you to get up in the morning and work at this? Because it's really hard work. I mean, people don't realize that, but like making games is tough. It's hard work. What drives you?
It is. It's a lot. I think one of my personal goals is to make games that are like on the surface silly and light, but like give people some sort of like an experience. So laughter I think is a very like tangible. A lot of things in gaming, you're like, oh, I'm a little afraid to roll that die, or oh no, I hope I don't draw a 6. But there's something about seeing people laugh, It's like I did a thing, something. Again, like as an artist, and so much that board game design is an art. Like it's cool to see somebody have an actual emotional reaction to something that you put out into the world. So yeah, getting people together, making people laugh, giving them a chance to create. The other games I've designed are also like drawing or creative or writing or word games. So those are really important things to me.
Great, man. Well, it's really exciting. Looks like a really unique and fun game. People can expect it in October, is that right?
October, yes. Yeah, you can get it from the Bicycle website, other places, potentially.
Great. Well, we'll look forward to October. Thanks so much, Eric.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Drew Dixon here from Love Thy Nerd, and I'm joined with Michael Fox from Habba Games. Hey, how are you?
I am okay. Joined with, like, seamlessly together?
Yeah, like conjoined, basically.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Strange use of prepositions. I'm joined by Michael Fox.
That sounds good. Sorry, like I was going to say it's Tuesday morning. It's not Tuesday morning. It's Friday morning.
Yeah.
The second day of the week, of the GenCon week. So
That's right.
I'm really tired, as you can probably tell. Anyway, hello, Drew. It's nice to see you again.
I already it's just day one yesterday, and I went home early, which I never do, but I just was already beat. It's not good. But
There seems to be this sort of malaise of tiredness over everybody who's here to work. So, whether you're press, whether you're a demoer, whether you're a retailer, whatever, everybody is just, as we would say back home, absolutely knackered. And it's weird.
Yeah, it is.
We're all sort of operating at 8% speed.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. So we chatted with you maybe a couple of Gen Cons ago about...
it was last year for...
was it last year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's only the second time we've actually been here.
That's right. Okay, so we talked at length about Holding On, The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr. How's the reception been now that that's out?
It's doing really solid. It's not a record-breaking extravaganza, but we never thought it was going to be.
Sure.
It's interesting because it's become this really polarizing game. There are folks who are absolutely 100% bang into it. We got nominated for the Diana Jones Award, which was announced on Wednesday. We didn't win it. Starcross won it. Starcross is a great winner. But we were put up for this Excellence in Gaming Award, and it's why? That's weird. And then you have other people who go that you shouldn't be making games about old men who are dying, and it's just sort of stop us.
Yeah.
But it's been people either really well receive it or go, it's not for me.
Sure.
What we really want is to see sort of folks who are maybe a bit in the middle and think, okay, I'll give this a try because they're trying to do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of people who sort of take that leap have been really sort of really into it, which is great.
Yeah.
We're doing multiple different language versions of it now. So our office back in Northern Ireland is currently just covered in prototype boxes of different languages. So there's the Polish one and the French one. It's just sort of strange seeing this whole array of this game that we created just now going out to an even wider audience. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely encourage our listeners to go check it out because, like you said, I don't think it's really something that's been done in the tabletop space. A game that's simultaneously mourns the loss of our loved ones in a way, but also I think celebrates life in a way that's pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much meant to be the celebration of an extraordinary life of an ordinary person.
Yeah.
And when we spoke last year, we really wanted to reinforce the idea of Billy is a human being. He's obviously not a real human being, but he is an amalgam of experiences, and he's done some good things in his life. He's done some very bad things in his life, and you get to see all of those yourself. You get to experience that story from an outsider's perspective. But eventually, you build up the trust with him, and you'll find out what kind of person he is.
And your core job is just to take care of him, which I really like because, I think we talked about this in our last interview, but, I think one of the things that we talk about a lot at Love Thy Nerd is just the value of people. People are valuable at their core, and despite, whatever bad decisions Billy's made in the past, you still have to just like keep him healthy, like, but also like care for him as a human being, like make sure he feels valued, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Hippocratic Oath is the classic, do no harm, look after the person's body. Yeah. But as people, intrinsically, we want to care about other people around us. We want to give a damn about what they're like. Yeah. If I see you at the end of the booth and you're feeling incredibly sad, like, naturally, most people will walk up to you and go, like, Drew, what's wrong?
Yeah.
What can I do to help you?
Right.
Because, we're naturally empathic creatures, most of us. Some of us are slightly psychopathic, but there you go. We care. And there's not a lot of games out there that sort of push that idea of, keep an eye on someone.
Yeah.
Care about them.
Right.
It's different.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the second one goes.
Yeah. So now you've got this new project that you were just chatting with me about, Megacity Oceana, and
Very different.
Yeah, another game that I would say I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. So yeah, give us. I know it's sort of like hard to give the elevator pitch for this one, I imagine, but
it is very visual, admittedly. So the idea is it is a dexterity game mixed in with a little bit of strategy, a little bit of forward planning. Basically, it's a little bit of like a Euro strategy, which is not exactly a genre that's around. So, storyline-wise, it's 2100 to solve like the population boom.
Yeah.
The sort of like the governments of the world have come together. This is me being like super positive. I'm really hoping this is going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've developed this new technology that allows us to build these floating platforms that can hold these immense megastructures.
Yeah.
So, to make the first megacity, which is off the coast of Australia, which is a very important thing in my head because I wanted this beautiful blue sky vibe, like positive, almost like an 80s arcade kind of vibe.
Sure.
So you're given a whole bunch of contracts which the city managers need you to build. So they'll have a minimum height requirement on them, an amount of pieces that you need to use in the building, and architectural elements as well. You can draw pieces from the bag, which are weird and wonderful shapes. They come in three different material types. They're all plastic, but there's transparent, which is glass. There's steel, and there's concrete. And there's also platforms to build on. So you will build when it's not your turn. So there's no downtime in the game, which means that you're always going to be doing something. When it comes around to you, if you have a completed building, you will then ask all the other players to briefly stop as you then slide the building across the floor, across the play area.
Yeah.
So you're kind of hoping that you've built nice and stably, and you add it into the city. So you're collaborating on this singular city, which will look beautiful at the end of the game. But you are also fighting against each other to become the most prestigious architect.
Right.
We also have a nice little award ceremony at the end of the game because architects love awards, which is great. And then whoever has the most prestige points is declared the winner. And you've made this unique and beautiful city at the end of the game. It's great.
How's the reception been so far?
Ridiculously great. Like we had a few pre-orders and they went down pretty well.
Yeah.
But then we came to the show, and after the first hour, I had 6 units, like 6 copies of the game left. We're sold out now. All we have is like a handful of copies left over for people to pick up for pre-order. But the game comes out in September, officially in stores. Its big proper convention release is going to be at Essen.
Okay.
In October.
Yeah.
So we've got a bunch of folks who are just coming in to sit down for a quick game.
Yeah.
And it's just been uniquely positive.
Yeah.
And I don't deal with like praise super well. Like the Irish intrinsically have we're not super into like people telling us that we're doing good stuff. But I'm slowly learning and making it better.
That's cool. Yeah, and if you had to narrow it down to one thing, what do you hope players get out of their experience, gain from their time playing Oceana? Or Megacity Oceana, sorry.
Well, I would say, okay, we sit down a lot, and every time we sit down we play a game. Like we say, we're playing a game. Like you could be pushing a bunch of cubes around a board for 4 hours, you could be playing Cards Against Humanity or whatever. But you don't really sort of like unlock the whole 5-year-old inside you that just wants to play with stuff. I often find like when folks are sitting down playing a Euro game that has a whole bunch of resources, they will fiddle about with all the bits.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of
kind of the best part of Settlers of Catan.
Yeah, just messing around with things. But this game was kind of born of that.
Yeah.
Like Megacity was kind of born of that natural thing of people just playing and fiddling around with things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want people to just enjoy the experience of just playing.
Yeah.
Just be a kid. Like, it's why I love Lego.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm feeling like I've got something stuck in my brain, I can't work it, I can't work through it, I'll just, get out a big bucket of Lego and start fiddling about with things. And it removes you from that problem that your brain is trying to process.
Right.
And it just allows you to sort of access a different bit of your brain, and I want people to do that with this.
Yeah.
And just make cool, beautiful things.
Yeah. Well, it really is. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful looking game, and I'm excited. Will the game come in on that mat like that, or does it have a board? I assume.
So it doesn't come with the board.
Okay.
You get all of the pieces, the contracts, all of the tiles. It doesn't come with the play mat. That's like a horrifyingly expensive but very lovely extra.
Yeah.
It also weighs like 6 pounds because it's the size of a small house.
Yeah.
So we made a couple for our distribution partners. So it's like it helps us demo the game. It helps us show off. But then people go, "Can I buy it?"
Yeah.
It's like, all right. So yeah, you have to get it through our website.
Cool.
But I intentionally wanted to not have a board in the game because you can actually play the game on a table. We have a second table over here, which is like 24 inches across, circular, but you can play the game on that as well.
That's great.
The table becomes a component part of the game. So if you've got like this rickety, janky looking table that's like one leg is shorter than the other, you have to build stably to keep your buildings on there.
That's fine.
So it's a very different experience wherever you play.
Yeah, that's cool. It also sounds like maybe there's some element here that would hopefully encourage people to be a little bit more thoughtful about, the way we inhabit space as people and maybe the environment and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not in the rules, but a thing that I like to do is when I'm at a show and I'm demoing the game to people. I like them to tell me about the buildings that they're making.
Yeah.
So it's like you sort of like create this unique story of the city that you're building.
Yeah.
Sometimes it goes really nicely, and it's like, oh no, so I'm calling this the such and such Memorial Residential Park because, well, my granny, she just died, and I'm going to make it for her, that kind of thing. And it's like, oh, this is the mall where you can only buy glass slippers and things like this. Yeah. So you make this weird and wonderful story. Sometimes it takes a turn for the weird, and you have like the chicken carcass processing plant that we had a couple of days ago. Right. That was weird. But the idea being of like occupying spaces, like you are building a space for you to live in.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that most of us want to live in a beautiful place. Most of us want to live in a place that is not just a functional machine for living in.
Yeah.
So we've introduced the idea of you add parks to it. You can put statues in those parks to sort of like add some culture and add some beauty to the place. But yeah, for me, I think the most important thing is the uniqueness of what you're creating.
Right. Yeah.
It just becomes this sort of like collective art piece as well as individual game.
Yeah, that's great. Last question. I've asked you this before, but be curious to hear if your answer has changed or morphed. Why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I can't remember what I said last year, so it's where I completely embarrassed myself by going for a completely different answer. Why do I make games? I make games. I don't want to change the world because I'm not going to be able to do that. There's like nearly 7 billion of us here, and I can't affect everybody. But I want to make people happy. Just a little bit. Like if I can make somebody happy by something that I've had a hand in creating, even if it's like half an hour, I think I'm doing okay. Like I don't know if we covered this last year. I suffer from chronic depression.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit.
And I find it very, very hard a lot of the time some days getting out of bed is a challenge.
Sure.
Some days going to the office is a challenge, but there are folks out there who have it a hell of a lot worse than I do. And on those days when I can work, when I can function, if I can make something that's going to make somebody else's day a bit better, then I think I've done all right out of it.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I would encourage our listeners to go check out Megacity Oceana. I will say, when you pitched it to me just now, it's one of the first games here at GenCon that is just like, oh, I need this. I want to play this. So it's a really compelling concept. So September, look for it in online and stores and such. So great. Cool. Well, thanks again, Michael.
Nice one. Thank you as always for having us, man. It's much appreciated. Keep up the awesome work.
Yeah, thanks. Drew Dixon here at GenCon. Had to think about where we were for a minute. Here at GenCon with April-Lyn, who is our... tell us your title at Love Thy Nerd.
I am the Chief Resource Nerd.
Well, it just changed, so I had to remember your title. But you keep us organized and resourced, and it's great. And so we're here with Rob Davio. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, Davio.
Okay.
You said Davio, but that's what my brother says, so it's close enough. You got the end part right, which is the hard part. Davio.
And he has the same last name, but he says it differently?
Yeah, why not? It's a hard name.
Yeah. And so we're here at GenCon, and you're showing off Heist. So tell us about Heist.
Heist is a different for me, but it goes back to my roots at Hasbro. It's like a just electronic game where you just have to keep up and follow instructions, which sounds easy, but it moves pretty quickly. You're basically playing 2 to 4 members of a heist team going into a bank, and the game is giving you instructions like hacker, use the explosives, or give the map to the money man, and you're just moving pieces around and pushing buttons, but you have to keep track of where all the pieces are, who you are, and you have to not miss like a beat, right? If you're like a second late doing something, or you get out of sync and you don't hand something to someone, you'll make mistakes, and then when you make 3 mistakes, you fail out, but if you get to the end, then you win. And it's just like a little 3 to 4 minute fun little co-op, sort of escape room meets group bop it sort of thing.
Yeah. Like a escape room bop it that you can put on your kitchen table. That's great. Yeah.
It's been fun seeing people, especially Gen Con gamers, kind of come and just like play and lose at the beginning. They're like, hold on, this is a kid's game. And then they like play again. There's a group now on their 3rd try. But I think they got it now.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
If you had to narrow down to one thing, what do you hope players gain out of their experience playing Heist?
Playing this?
Yeah.
Well, a vague sense of panic followed by accomplishment. Yeah, well, it's not even a vague, an active sense of panic.
Yeah.
Right, I was playing when I like to refresh myself because it's been a while before you got here. I'm like, ooh, you got to focus on this thing. But it's just really this sense of you're hyper-focused for about 3 minutes. And it's got this beat that gets louder, which is on purpose to sort of become this sort of feeling like that. And then when it gets to the end and money will spill out of the top, I've seen grown people actively cheer at little plastic gold things coming out. So there's a real sense of accomplishment at the end.
Yeah, so how did you go from, you've done like Axis and Allies, Pandemic Legacy, and you were involved in Risk Legacy too, right? And Betrayal at House on the Hill. How did you, now you're doing a little electronic game. How did that happen?
Well, I was at Hasbro for 14 years, so I spent my time around kids' games and toys. And when I left, there was another person who left at the same time. He's an electronics guy. And we were just looking at different ideas. And there was a game out at the time, Space Team, on the phone, where you're just following
I love that game.
You're just following instructions. Now, that one's a little different, where you have to read the instructions and then everyone's talking over each other. And we're like, well, how do we do that as like a kid's version? And they're like, well, if something was just following instructions, just literally do this thing, and you're like, I can do this thing, and then you just get panicked. And sometimes it's just a simple idea. And I like doing stuff like that. It's just hard to sell games into the mass market unless you do it full time. But I'm having so much fun with like these deeper games that I'm not taking the time to do the lighter ones, let alone sell them. But then this other guy and I partnered up with someone who regularly sells games into the mass market, and we partner with him, and he's looking at our old ideas like, no, this is good. I can sell this in. So I worked on this in 2013 or 14, and then it just sat on a shelf for 3 years. I'm like, I know it's a good game, but I didn't know how to sell it because it was like a whole different world, and then here it is.
That's going to feel good to go back to old ideas and unshelve them.
It always feels good, and especially with something so simple. Sometimes I go back to an old idea and I look at it and I go, oh no, this wasn't very good. Right? That's why it wasn't bought. I got stuck and I tried to fix it, and I just wanted it to be done, not to be good. And sometimes I can fix it then, and sometimes it's like, no. And it just goes back on the shelf, and I know eventually I'll move and look at it and go, I'm not going to finish this.
Is there... because you've made a lot of games. I mean, I think, you could walk around this. Also, you could walk around this convention hall and see a lot of games that have been influenced by some of your designs. Is there something that unifies the various games that you make? Like, is there a unique value that you hope players get out of their time playing a game that you've had your hand in?
I don't know if I have a unique value. I mean, I probably have a signature style, although I try consciously to mix it up to do things like this that feel very different. But the games that mean the most to me tend to... I want people the next day to talk about them, and if you overheard them, you would think they were talking about a movie or a book or a TV show. I really try for experience design. And I'm really trying in a lot of my games to have a moving experience, like a genuine experience from something that's not genuine in many ways, and in fact is supposed to be escapist. So, you were mentioning before you played Pandemic Legacy. I tried to put a couple moments in there of either anger or fear or pathos. And if you play Season 2, I mean, there's definitely some pathos and some things in there that I try to play with preconceptions, or Matt and I do. I don't know. I kind of want at the end to no one to talk about the mechanics when they finish.
Yeah,
That's great. They talk about the experience that they felt while playing it.
Yeah. I'll never forget the time that we lost Medic Mike. That was a horrible experience in Pandemic Legacy.
I remember that moment in Pandemic Legacy 2 where, spoiler alert, you have to sacrifice somebody.
Oh, wow. We might have to...
I was going to say, Medic Mike had made some choices in his life that caught up with him. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No, we didn't sacrifice... I was playing Season 1, so we didn't sacrifice Medic Mike. He was just overcome. We'll put it that way. Yeah. So.
But, because he had a name... and you had a bonding and you played with him for a while, you still remember his name, and you just told the story like he was overcome with challenges. Like, you actually didn't just say like, you got a second scar one time because we got a bad card shuffle. See, that's what I'm trying to think. You're talking about a story and an emotional moment like a book or a movie that you connected with, and when not breaking down to, the mechanics underneath it. So I guess that's the underlying takeaway I want people to get. And it's hard to do. I drive sometimes co-designers and developers and stuff nuts, so I'm like, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell I have one more question for you. I told you I'd tell you my Pandemic Legacy story. It's definitely one of the most resonant board game experiences I've ever had. And we made it through, I think, 10 games. And then our good friends that we were playing it through moved to Minneapolis. I live in Nashville, and so it's like, we're trying to it's so devastating that we're like, can't finish the campaign, but we're trying to convince them to come visit us. We're going to go visit them. We're determined to get those last few games in. So really, really love that game and that experience.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I've heard that a lot of people, someone moves away and they finish, either take a vacation or they just finish on Skype. Right, like someone's like, you have a camera on your hand of cards and another camera on the board. And people do these elaborate, like, multi-camera rigs so that the people can sort of finish because they're invested. And, I know it's a time commitment and everything like that, but I really, really feel fortunate for having come up with a legacy concept to give people a deeper experience into a board game than a one-off, which are still fun and there's plenty of room for them. But this other avenue for people to have a longer, more, not intimate experience, but involved.
Yeah, more committed in a way, certainly. Yeah. So last question I like to ask designers is, what drives you to do this? What motivates you to make games? Why do you make games?
I'm a storyteller. All of my jobs have been in some version of storytelling. I was going to be a comedy writer. I fell in love with games from role-playing. I was actually an advertising copywriter, right? And I learned how to tell stories that way, like on a billboard. I just come up with interesting ideas, and I want to let people live in those worlds and those experiences I come up with. And, the idea that I could come up with another cool idea or another cool world and then have people come up to me years later. I mean, I've been doing this long enough where people come up in their 20s saying they grew up playing my games, or I've had people get a tattoo of Pandemic Legacy 2 because they played it with their father who since passed away. And it was like the last thing he did with it. I can get choked up talking about it. I'm like, okay, that meaningful experience, either whether it's a Christmas morning or a birthday party or staying up too late or something with a dying parent, like if I can bring entertainment or joy to those moments, that's a really fun way to spend one's life.
That's great. Well, thanks so much. This was great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, Drew Dixon here with Humans of Gaming. I'm here with Tiffany Caires. Did I say it right? Caires.
Yeah, you got it.
Cool. And you're with Habba Games. What's your role with Habba?
I'm the games manager for Habba, so I'm head of games for Habba USA.
Cool. And how long have you been doing that?
6 months.
How's it been going so far?
Fantastic. I used to be a content creator and like social media manager for a variety of companies, and I've always loved Habba Games, and I always talked about Habba Games, and I always wanted to work with Habba, and so it's a dream come true, and it's fabulous.
Yeah, Habba Games get a lot of play in the Dixon household because I have pretty young children, and so it's one of the things I appreciate about Habba is it seems like there's an effort to make good games that are fun to play and not stupid. I mean, some of them are, there's like some playful stupid elements in some of them, but like they're good games for kids that 5 and my 4-year-old, one of my children of 4 even played them. So is that something that kind of motivates you guys as a company?
Yeah, so Habba actually originally started 81 years ago, and the priority was to make high-quality wooden toys and games that the whole family could enjoy. So originally it started as making high-quality toys that could be passed down to, kids and generations, and quality stuff that even parents would enjoy. And so when they started making games, they wanted to make games that you wanted to keep playing with your kids. Because if you've got kids, you're going to end up playing that game if they like it every day for the next year and a half. And so Habba wanted to make sure that 1, the game would last, and 2, you wouldn't hate yourself for having ever originally purchased that game for your kids. You want to have a good experience along with your children. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. And I've noticed, too, your studio seems to be, diversifying, I think, and even dipping into some more adult games, not like with adult themes necessarily, but more games that are aimed at an older audience as well, in addition to what you're already offering. Can you give me some examples or tell me about that?
Yeah, so our traditional line, our yellow box line that we've had for generations at this point, is the most well known. And while we do say, it's 5 and up or 6 and up, and we do mean the up, sometimes you want something that's a little bit more mentally challenging. And so Habba created a game line called Game Night Approved, and these games are the more involved strategic games or maybe social deduction games or that kind of stuff. But they're still games that they're accessible for a younger audience, not maybe quite as young. And so the idea was that we wanted the game to grow with your kids. We have families growing up on Habba, and they would reach that elementary, 3rd, 4th grade age, and they would be like, oh, I've played that. I'm too old for that now. And so your kids are growing up, your relationship with them is growing up. We wanted games that would grow with the family. And challenge the kids still and make it interesting and help them also grow in certain skills as they age.
Cool. Great. And what are you showing here that you're particularly excited about?
So I'm really excited about, we have 2 new releases. We have Wobble King, which is one of our yellow box games, and it's one of those silly ones that you would say is a little silly and straightforward from a playing standpoint. There's not a lot, mentally going on, but you have a king and he's sleeping on a pile of treasure, and you're sneaking the treasure out from under him and just rearranging it. You're not stealing the treasure, you're just rearranging it. You're one of the guards and you're bored, and if you knock the king over, if he wobbles and knocks over, he wakes up and he throws a rotten tomato at you. And so it's one of these games that I really love, and I love watching adults play it for the first time, especially with kids, because the kids have no fear. They're just like, shonk, and they take out like 5 or 6 treasure at once and then just toss it up. Whereas the adults are like, oh, I just have to very cautiously, very slowly get this one silver out. And then, it's really funny because in the end, the kids, if they lose, they don't care. They had a great time, and the adults are just so nervous about losing. Yeah. So I love to watch families play that one, and the adults realize, no, this is for fun. We can do it. So that one, it's got great reception. It's selling really well. It's available in stores already. And then the other one is Mountains, which is part of our Game Night Approved line. And so that one is one that is a memory game. So you're going on hikes and you need equipment for your hike, but you only have so much equipment yourself, and so you have to borrow from other players, and so there's a little bit of bluffing that you can do to try and when you borrow, like you can bluff and say that you have equipment that maybe you don't have, but you have to pay to actually borrow. You have to pay, and once currency is exchanged, there can be no bluffing. So it's like Go Fish meets Clue a little bit, with a great, if you like hiking or the outdoors, the cover is just gorgeous. So yeah.
Yeah, and then a couple more questions. One is there, if you had to narrow down to like one thing, is there an underlying value to Habba Games? What do you hope players gain from their experience playing your games?
I think the biggest thing, we have a whole mission statement. It's fantastic. If you ever have a chance, go to habbausa.com. There's great videos about the history. But the biggest thing is that Habba believes in the power of play. And so they believe that playing can bring people together and have great experiences together, and that you would be surprised at the power of play and what it can do for your relationships, for your kids, for social skills, for mental skills, for emotional skills. Talking about winning and losing with kids at a young age and developing those skill sets is great. And it's just, you can have fun. You can have genuine fun, and more people need to play games and remember that they can just play. And I think in the gaming hobby, we know this. Like, that's what we do. We love to play. But there's so many people in this world that feel that they're an adult now, and so they don't get to play anymore. And the age that people are starting to say, oh, you can't play anymore, that's getting younger and younger and younger, and that's awful. And so Habba believes in the power of play and making sure that everyone gets to play.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. And then last question I like to ask people in the games industry is, why do you do this? Why do you make games?
Me or Habba?
Well, I'm really more interested in you, but you can share both.
This is why I get along really great with Habba is I do this because I love people realizing that they can play, that it's not just silly, stupid trivia things. They can be mentally engaged and they can have a fun, enjoyable time and play basically an imaginary world. If you think about it, a game is a group of people sitting down and agreeing to operate in an imaginary rule that the designers have created and the artists have, rendered into life. And you're just playing pretend for that time period of the game, and you're just playing and you're having a great time with friends, and maybe not friends, but they will be soon. And that's why I do it. I love seeing people have fun and play and enjoying their time with each other in a way that we don't often get these days.
Right. It's an inherently inclusive activity, where everyone's welcome around the table and everyone's equal around the table, because you've all signed up for this rule set and these expectations, and there's something really beautiful about that. In fact, there's a kind of one of the, I guess, fathers of game design or whatever, Johann Huizinga, called it the magic circle, because it's like this space set apart, which you don't have a lot of spaces like that, like in this day and age. There's like a lot of like spaces where it doesn't feel very like inclusive or welcoming in our culture. So anyway, as you're sharing that, it just made me think about how special games are, I guess, which isn't. It's cool to hear that motivates you, and then also Habba as an organization.
Yeah. It's and I think more and more people are realizing it. I think that the hobby is growing, and more people are being brought into games, and they're remembering. Back in the 80s and the 90s, family game night was a thing. It's coming back. I think people are realizing, computer games and video games are great, but it's not the same experience. Yeah. It's not the same as sitting across the table, being able to look people in the eyes, and have an imaginary world that can go beyond a video game, and you use your imagination more than you would in a video game, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, well, that's great. Thanks, Tiffany. We really appreciate the interview, and definitely be looking for your. Are those two games both available now?
Yeah. They are both in stores now. So at Habba, we try really hard not to do convention exclusives. So we really want to support local businesses. It's a big thing we do. If you go to habbausa.com, you can look on our website for a store near you that has Habba products. Sometimes there's toy stores. A lot of toy stores will stock Habba games. So if you don't have a game store that has them, you might have a toy store. Check it out.
Great. Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. Drew Dixon here at GenCon. Had to think about where we were for a minute. here at GenCon, and I'm here with Nick Little. So, Nick, what is your role with Indie Boards and Cards?
I'm the Vice President of Development and Production for Indie Game Studios, which is the parent company for Indie Boards and Cards, Action Phase Games, and Stronghold Games.
Okay, cool, great. And I've noticed, it just seems like you guys are putting out a ton of games. Like, what do you have that you're showing here that you're really excited about?
The game I'm probably most excited about here is Aeons in the New Age, because it's the 4th expansion and introduces the Expedition system, which is like a campaign system that allows players to reuse all their content in a string of games, because Aeons End was a one-off game before that, so you'd only play one at a time. It's a follow-up to Aeons End Legacy, which is like a really long campaign, but it was a legacy game, so you couldn't really replay it. I'm also super excited about Finger Guns at High Noon, which is a really fun party game where you're shooting your friends and blowing them up with dynamite and stuff like that, and it's a lot of pointing and yelling at each other. Those are my favorite kinds of party games. Potemkin Empire is a really fun game. So, in that game, it kind of recreates. It's based on the historical story of Grigory Potemkin, who was a boyfriend of Catherine the Great, and he was a huge swindler, a con man. And he planned this trip for Catherine down the Dnieper River, where they would boat past these towns that he had built up these facades along the riverbank, and he would talk to her about how awesome the town was and how she should just invest some money in the town. And so he would talk her into spending all this money, and then when she would stop for the night, his team would tear down the facades and run them down the river and then rebuild them. So he just bilked her out of money over and over and over again as he showed her the same buildings in different configurations, and none of them were real. They were just all fake buildings. So in that game, you play a mayor of a city, and you're trying to win the affection of the queen by building all these buildings, and some of them are real and some of them are fake, and there are 5 different building types. So it's like this really light, like empire building game with a social element where, because you can build a bunch of fake buildings and I can use spies to kind of knock them down to check what you've done. Yeah. And there are several different strategies in the game, and you can, because all the buildings could be fake, you basically get to choose whatever action you want to take every time, because whenever you're drafting cards, you're just drafting the interiors. So you can build any type of building with any interior card.
Right. Yeah, we played it yesterday and had a lot of fun. And I didn't realize like that term Potemkin is actually like a phrase for something that's fake.
Yeah. There are several countries that kind of build up this. They'll show their huge military force and put on these big parades to make it look like everything is going right in the country, when in actuality, their people are starving, or their factories aren't really real. Right. So that's where the Potemkin Empire comes from, because they would call them Potemkin villages was the original term. Yeah.
If you had to, and maybe speak to Potemkin, but then also the games you guys publish as a whole, is there like a unique value or something that you hope players get out of their experience with every one of your games?
Yeah, for Indie Boards and Cards, the main thing that we look for is social interaction. Yeah. So the company is kind of founded on Coup, the success of Coup and Resistance and Avalon, these games that are social deduction games where you're not really looking at the actual components of the game very much. You're looking at interacting with your friends and the people that are with you. Yeah. Because we think when you sit down to play a board game or card game, you're doing that for the company, right? Yeah. For the people, creating experiences with the people around you. If you're sitting down and you're really just looking at cubes on a mat in front of you or on a board and you're just pushing them around and you never really look up and interact with your family or your friends or whoever you're playing with, to us, that's not the experience we're trying to cultivate. We're trying to cultivate this talking to each other and forging relationships or strengthening bonds, right? So that's why Coup and Resistance were so successful, and that's why the games that we pushed here, Aeons End is a co-op game where you have to communicate with each other or you are going to fail. Finger Guns, the components in that game are very light, and you're basically just pointing at each other and trying to blow them up and stuff like that, and you're yelling, like I said. And with Potemkin Empire, like, you are building this kind of cool-looking, stand-up cardboard empire, but also you're trying to figure out, based on what other people are doing, if they're lying about things or not. So there's a lot of social interaction in all those games.
That's great. I'd be curious to hear you speak to this. I like to give people some, there's still, I think, some people in our culture today that look at board gaming and this sort of hobbyist gaming type things and think they're like a waste of time or like sort of childish. What do you say to people about what's someone missing out on if they take that attitude?
Well, just like any hobby in life, right? Or anything that people enjoy. There are people that enjoy it and there are people that don't enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
And you could tell me your favorite hobby in the world and you could rave about it. And if I think it's stupid, even if I try it, it's because I go into it with a bad attitude. I'm probably not going to enjoy it. Like anything I don't want to enjoy, I'm not going to enjoy, right?
Yeah.
But if people come into the experience with an open mind, because a lot of people think board games, the people that you're referring to, typically the board games they have played are all the Parker Brothers and those games from the 70s and before. And board gaming in general has come so much further as far as design from there. The games are so much more interesting. A lot of them are just like a lot simpler, and they've tied it down to just the fun aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you could get someone that feels that way and you could show them like a real easy to learn kind of light game that's so much different from Monopoly and Sorry and Trouble and stuff like that, it's a whole different world. There's a game for anybody as long as they're willing to try it with an open mind. And that's, I mean, it's board games are, the market is continuing to grow. Like there are more people playing board games now than ever. And we said that the last 5 years, every year it's grown, right?
Yeah.
So people are opening themselves to this opportunity. And in a world right now where everything is so digital, everyone's looking at their phones or they're online all the time, it gives you the opportunity to interact with your friends in an analog manner where you're actually sitting around a table and talking and hanging out and creating experiences.
Yeah, sure. And then last question I like to ask people in the games industry is, why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I do it because I love it. I love games and I'm good at it, and it's a lot of time it doesn't really feel like work, you know. And I'm fortunate enough that everyone that works in the company that I work with, I'm friends with them. So, you know, that's kind of, I got into this industry with my best friend, and you know, our company was acquired by another guy who now, like, we're good friends, and everybody I've ever worked with has been a pretty good friend of mine, and it makes the work environment so much easier and enjoyable. And like I said, it doesn't really feel like work most of the time.
Gaming helps with that, because it's like you're all working around this sort of shared love that's like rooted in fun and community,
right?
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool. Well, this is great chatting with you, Nick. Thanks so much for your time.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah. Drew Dixon here from Love Thy Nerd. I'm here with Peter McPherson, and you made Tiny Towns. So I just feel like I hear everybody talking about it. What's it been like making a game that's like been pretty successful? What's that experience been like?
Surreal, I suppose. It's my first published game, my first halfway decent game design, so it's just been really cool to see all the posts on Instagram and Twitter and Reddit talking about the game, and just to know that my game is being played by families all over the place and friends, so pretty weird, still sinking in.
Yeah. Was that something that you set out to do, to make a game that is played by families in particular, that's family, I think at least family friendly, maybe even feels very inclusive, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I want it to be totally family friendly in terms of theme and just ease of play. I also hope there's enough challenge there for more gamers.
Sure.
And one thing I think works well is if there is a family playing and you've got the parents who maybe are gamers and are more experienced than the younger kids, just the nature of the game, the parents might be having a really tough puzzle and a tough time figuring out what to do with their resources while the kids are just sort of coasting. So I've been trounced by young kids many times in my own game. So
That's great. And if you had to narrow it down to one thing, well, I guess before I ask that question, let's give the listener who doesn't know, what is Tiny Towns? Like, what makes it unique?
Sure. So Tiny Towns is a town building game where everyone's got a small 4x4 grid they're going to be filling with resources arranged in certain patterns to make buildings. So when you get the pattern for a building, the resources glom down into one space and you place the building meeple. And you get those resources by taking turns as master builder. So when you have the master builder hammer, you name one of the 5 resources and then everyone must place it whether they want it or not. So I think that aspect makes it unique in that the randomness is player generated. Though there is a mode to play with a resource deck as well for more of a roll and write experience. I also think it's a game where your choices become more limited as you go on, which I haven't seen a ton of. So at the start, it's wide open pasture. You know, you can just see all of your plans ahead of you, and as the game goes on, your choices become more and more limited as space runs out.
Yeah, I remember when I played, really regretting my early choices. But that's a fun experience to realize. I think good games force you to recognize the mistakes you made in the past at times, which can be really valuable. Makes you want to try again, you know?
Right, yes. It's your fault usually when something goes wrong, and hopefully you know how you can prevent it in future games. Sometimes there's just that one guy who keeps on saying yellow, but usually it's your fault when things go wrong.
Yeah, right, exactly. And if you had to narrow down to one thing, what do you hope players gain from their time playing Tiny Towns?
I hope everyone gains a sense of satisfaction, whether you did poorly or pretty well, because at the end of the game, you've got your own tiny town that you can admire, and it's a game of a series of very small goals that just take 1 or 2 turns to achieve. So I hope players feel satisfaction in setting their sights on a goal, and within just a couple turns, achieving that goal and moving on to the next thing.
Great, cool. And another question I like to ask game designers is, what motivates you to make games? What drives you to do this?
Just the sheer fun of it, and the fact that I can have an idea in my head, and within a couple hours of sloppy prototyping, I can show it to friends and have an experience to play together. I think there aren't many other creative endeavors where you can make something so quickly and then share in that experience. An author can't read their book and experience it the same way a game designer can play their own game and have a fun time.
Yeah. And share that game around the table with other people, which is a pretty cool experience.
Exactly, yeah. It's a creative process that brings people together.
Yeah, definitely cool. And this is available now, right?
Yep, yeah. It was released back in May, so it's available at friendly local game stores, online on Amazon, Cool Stuff Inc., and sites like that.
Cool, great. Well, I've enjoyed playing it. We've enjoyed checking it out here at GenCon, and it's been great talking to you, Peter. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew Dixon here at GenCon with Jeff Beck. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good. Where are you from?
I'm from Salt Lake City.
Okay, cool. And how long have you been making games?
About 3, professionally about 3 years.
Okay.
It started when I was probably 8 years old, and I was making variants on Candyland and whatnot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, designing games on the playground too, probably.
Oh yeah, all kinds of stuff. Had to reinvent basketball at least twice,
Yeah, it's not great. It needs improvement.
Absolutely, a little worker placement, it'd be great.
Yeah, that's cool. So you and Tim Fowers kind of have your own company kind of thing going on here. Tell me about some of you've made several games. What are the ones you're most proud of?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of my game called Hardback. It's the follow-up to the fairly popular game Paperback. I love deck building games. I also love word games. My game before that was called Word Domination, which is also a word game. So I'm a big fan of word games, so that one I play a lot. There's an app version I play with my kids like literally every day. Yeah, so that's really fun. And then my newest game that just came out called Getaway Driver is a really tight 2-player kind of head-to-head game. It's just really thematic. Like if you've ever seen any car chase in a movie, you can recreate it in this game, and it's just a blast.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know you've made lots of different types of games. So is there one unifying value to all those games that you kind of look to as this is what I hope players get out of their experience playing my games?
Right. Yeah. So I tend to lean toward lighter games, but lighter in the sense that you don't have to read a 60-page manual to figure out how to play, but there's still a lot of depth and a lot of strategy into it. So I think that's the theme of my games, is I can teach you how to play in 5 minutes, but there's a lot going on, and you're going to discover how this piece interacts with that piece that you didn't see the first 3 times you played that game, and those are the kind of experiences I'm really trying to design.
Yeah, that's great. And, I know we played, I don't know if you can talk about this, but we played one of your games last night that's not even announced or anything yet.
That's true. It's still in development, but, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, so I can talk about that a little bit. So it's called Intrepid.
Yeah.
It takes place on board the International Space Station. So every player represents an astronaut from a different country, so a really diverse crew. We have people from the United States and Canada and Russia, but also from Malaysia and Japan, and we're looking at people from South Africa and really all over the world, which is a pretty cool thing. And by the way, all these countries weren't just randomly selected. These are countries that have been to the International Space Station, so that's why they were picked. In the game, so you're all working together to keep the lights on inside the space station. You got to make sure there's enough power, enough oxygen, enough food, and enough temperature control. But there's a disaster going on. The game comes with a number of different disasters. It could be you're losing orbit and slowly sinking into the Earth's orbit, or it could be that there's a fire on the station, or there's a meteor shower going on, or any of these different disasters. They all play out differently, so you got to handle the situation in a different manner.
Right. So that one to me felt a little bit deeper than maybe what you've made in the past. So is there a desire for you to make a game that's takes more than 5 minutes to explain?
Yeah, and you're right. That one is, well, but the core mechanic of that one is still you're rolling dice and then you're placing those dice and triggering the action. So while it is a little more complex, it's very asymmetric. All the players play totally differently.
Yeah, you can explain the rules of that one pretty quick. It's just the
specifics
depth
of
strategy takes a bit longer.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I am of course expanding a little bit. I'm also really interested in games that really capture a moment or a feeling.
Yeah.
Like with Getaway Driver, I think it does a really good job of capturing that, oh my gosh, the police are on top of me, what am I going to do to get out? And on Intrepid, what I really wanted to capture was kind of the fear of being outside totally on your own, trying to fend for yourself away from the rest of the world that can help you out.
Yeah.
And so that's the feeling I'm trying to capture with Intrepid.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool. Well, I really enjoyed checking out Intrepid last night. I always enjoy checking out you and Tim's games. So one last question I like to ask designers is, what moves you to make games? What motivates you? Why do you get up in the morning and work on making games?
Yeah. So originally I was looking for a hobby that I could play with my kids, or that I could do with my kids, because they're getting a little older, and I wanted something that we could spend some quality time together. And so we started designing games together, and that was just a great thing. And that ultimately led into my, this becoming my career. And now I just really enjoy creating experiences for people. I just think it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging to be able to take a rule set and a bunch of cardboard and then create this emotion that is really captured well. But boy, when you can pull that off, it's fantastic.
How old are your kids?
So my oldest is headed off to college next month. So I'm an old man now.
And how many do you have?
I have 4 kids.
How are they helpful playtesters?
Oh yeah. Well, I sometimes have to bribe them. It depends on the game.
Yeah.
But no, they enjoy playing in fact, not only playing my game, but they sometimes help make the prototypes.
Yeah.
Like the original version of Hardback, which was all handwritten. My oldest daughter actually wrote every single card, and I traded her. I bought her movie tickets to go see Thor Ragnarok, so that was our deal. I think it was pretty good.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think you made out pretty well.
Okay, not bad, I suppose. So.
I'd take that deal.
Yeah, right.
My kids, like, anytime I offer to play games with them, it's like, oh yeah, but they're younger, So I'm not looking forward to that day when I'm like, hey, let's play a game, and they've got something else to do that's gonna crush me.
But yeah, you gotta breed them in early. So they're really excited about it. And then, it's making sure you pick the right game for the right kids, right? Like my 12-year-old, she loves complex strategy, honestly. That's like her thing. So if I can get a heavier game on the table, she's into that. Whereas the two that straddle her, I got a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old, and they're more into party games. They like the super light, or like maybe as like heavy as Sushi Go, and that's about it. Yeah. And so just picking the right game, I can get them excited.
Yeah. Cool. Good tip. Well, thanks so much, Jeff. It was great talking to you.
All right, great talking to you.
So I feel like Burgle Bros 2, it was hard. But I look back on it and I think, like, okay, there's some things we could have done, which is a sign of good game design, because I want to try my hand at it again,
Yeah, and a lot of times you don't know what's at stake. Like, you don't know, like, oh, I shouldn't be on the first floor, or until you see kind of what all the tiles do and everything, you can't make an informed decision about what risks to take. Sometimes you're going to run through the guard because it's like you need to go.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I look back at any puzzle design, like even when I do like an escape room, if I look at a puzzle, when I find out how it worked, I'm like, I wasn't going to get that.
Yeah.
And you feel like it was a little too arbitrary. Right. But if you look back and you're like, oh, when you feel like it's on you, you want to play again. You want to re-up. You're like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah.
So, and it's the mastery curve. I mean, that's what humans are kind of driven towards, is a sense of mastery. Raf Costa wrote a whole book called Theory of Fun.
Yeah.
That's all about, like, humans will always be driven towards something if they feel like they can get better at it, and it's mastery.
Yeah.
And that drives video games, that drives board games, Magic.
Sure.
But there's other motivations. I mean, the other two, based on like a psychological perspective, is relatedness. So like your network of people. So sometimes it's like Mario Kart. Is Mario Kart a good game?
Sometimes.
Is Mario Kart when it's good because of the company, or is it good because of the game?
Right.
And so that's the thing, is there's such a human element in games that it's hard to distinguish good games from good friends a lot of the time. You know,
right.
So because like Killer Bunnies is not a great game,
Right.
but if you're with the right crowd, it can be
time.
a good time.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So, and then the other one is autonomy, is just a sense of choice. So sometimes you'll play a game just so you can feel like you can make unique choices, either customization or I can try a different strategy.
Yeah.
And really that sense of agency and choice is a very human trait as well.
Yeah.
So usually those are the three things: mastery, autonomy and choice, and relatedness are these. It's called self-determination theory. And these are things that make people happy in the long term. And most people need all three of those in their life to be happy. Like those, and it's just an interesting lens to look through. So we look through it in games a lot. Because mastery is one axis, but we try to look at the other ones as well.
Yeah. I should say I'm here with Tim Fowers of Fowers Games. And
just clip that at the beginning. You just re-edit that.
It doesn't matter. People will enjoy the conversation regardless. But yeah, so are those three things that you're constantly thinking about when you design games?
Oh, I mean, so I've been introduced to a lot of psychology through game design.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different axes. That's kind of like, that's one lens to look through game design. I mean, Jesse Schell wrote a book called The Art of Game Design, and he has this concept of lenses. He has 100 different lenses, because a game is such an ephemeral system of rules and whatnot that you can't always look at it through a single lens. You have to constantly be shifting your perspective. And you're like, oh, let's look at it from the audience perspective. Look from the system's perspective. And so his book is 100 different ways to look at a game.
Oh wow.
And that's what you do. It's just, is it productive? Does it help me change something in the game that's going to make it better for more people, or is it going to make it more resonant with the theme? And so that's when the people say, is it a thematic game, or is it a kind of a dry Euro game or whatever? Those things you can kind of suss out when you're in this creative stage. So that's what I say, SDT is just one, because it's a psychological theory that has some data behind it.
Yeah.
I could name a bunch of other psychological theories. There are fun ways to look at things. I mean, it's. I mean, I've been giving talks on anticipation, and I have some theories about how your brain works with anticipation and how you get excited about things in the medium term and sometimes in the short term. You're like, ooh, I'm going to use this ultimate in Overwatch and it's going to kill everybody. Like there's all these different times. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of the craft. So we actually put together a conference called Tabletop Network.
Okay.
And we're running it in front of Board Game Geek, BGG Con.
Yeah.
Same hotel, 2 days before. So board game designers come, and we give talks like this. We give talks about STT, or we give talks about,
Participation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this year we've got Martin Wallace coming, and Matt Leacock are coming and giving talks.
Martin Wallace did, what is he?
Birmingham.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and I mean he's. It's like a cult. Like people that like Martin Wallace love Martin Wallace,
right.
and he's really good, and he's done a lot of self-publishing and whatnot. So we've gotten some great speakers, and the convention is evolving.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I try to mentor is the main thing, and this is a way to reach more designers.
Yeah.
Because really, everyone's really a designer.
Yeah.
I mean, if you play house rules.
Yeah.
And everybody plays Monopoly with house rules.
Yeah.
Then
How do you get through a game without house rules?
No, so everyone's a designer.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what's great is like this is an industry where really, it's all about, the motivation to create.
Yeah.
And start and finish projects.
Yeah.
And that's the main thing. Is a lot of people have ideas, but the follow through, see it through, even when you know that you're not really good at it yet.
Yeah.
And seeing it through and getting better. Get your 10,000 hours.
Yeah.
So
have you put 10,000 hours into designing games?
I'm 13 years in, full time.
So probably.
Yeah. I mean, I even have that with some of the guys I work with, and they're just a couple years in, and they'll kind of get frustrated with design. They're like, because it's this thing where your taste exceeds your talent.
Yeah.
So your taste for finding out, it's like you can tell good food better than you can cook good food.
Yeah.
And so they'll be frustrated because they're like, they'll see me design something, and they're like, okay, cool, and then they'll step up to the plate and they'll design something. They're like, what? And they're mad with their results because it didn't work out. I'm like, I can't tell you. You just have to keep trying.
Yeah.
You have to put the time in.
Right.
And it's also, you get past the point of like getting too precious about your ideas. You're just like, you know what? You know, if this isn't the last good idea I'm going to have, I'm going to make another thing, and I'm going to keep trying. And just kind of like, because people, when they first get into game design, they get really protective, and they worry that people are going to steal their ideas, and their idea probably isn't even really good yet. But so we do a lot of this kind of coaching. Even if they're a new designer, I try to coach them, and I'm just like, just finish something. Even if you don't like it by the time it's done, follow it through, and don't fret about it. Just like move on and do the next thing. So.
Well, so you guys are showing several games here. What are you kind of most proud of here at GenCon?
Well, I mean, there's two big things for me. I'm doing Burgle 2, which I just announced, and we got to play yesterday.
Last night, yeah.
And then Sabotage just arrived, and it's been a year in the works, or a year plus.
Yeah.
And it's our 2 versus 2 stealth game. It's 2 teams of 2, and just really good reception. We're down to the last like 2 copies.
That's cool.
And just, you know, proud of it. It's kind of this. I'm nervous again. You're nervous before a Kickstarter, but you're also nervous when you're delivering the game, and to see if the game can really stand on its own feet.
Yeah.
And we'll see. You know, so
you don't know yet.
I don't know. I mean, so far.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's also a mismatch. What I worry with Sabotage is it's different than my other games.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, you liked my other games, read the label. Don't just buy it because it's my game.
Right.
But like, read the label. And for people that are kind of into this, you know, medium heavy teamwork, you know, kind of bluffing and stealth movement and whatnot, they're gonna love this game. But like, if it's the paperback people that are playing, like, don't play Sabotage with your grandma. She's not gonna have a good time.
Right.
Play paperback with your grandma. She'll have a good time.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. I've asked you this before, but I'd be curious to hear if your answer has changed or evolved. Is there because you've made lots of different types of games now, is there something like a single value that drives all of them? If you had to narrow it down to like one thing, what do you hope players get from their time playing your games?
No, I mean, we try to answer the question of what would I do in that situation? Like, when you're watching a heist movie, part of your brain is like, can I do that? Can I pull that off? You know, or whatever, right? I mean, your brain is constantly going through those hypotheses, and we try to capture new emotions when it comes to that. And so answer questions like, could I survive a car chase? Is in Getaway Driver, you know, or you know, could I be James Bond in Sabotage? That's kind of been driving recently, is like pulling these emotions from movies, you know, or other media, and trying to answer these questions. I mean, a lot of games really always are kind of hitting on similar emotions. Domination being a big one. And a lot of games are about domination, and that really, I don't know what emotions I am, but that's one that I'm not. You know, like I don't have very many games that you're competing directly very much at all. I do asymmetrical, I do cooperative and whatnot, because I don't know. I don't like how I feel after a lot of competitive games. Even when it's just like a points race, I feel like I like my friends a little bit less. But like, when I made Burgle Bros and people were giving high fives after, like that's why I do it. So,
Gotcha.
You know.
Well, this is a similar question, but why do you make games? What drives you to do this?
I feel like for me, it's like, it's selfish. Whatever talent I have to share, right? So if I have a good idea for something, I've always just feel obligated. Like, if I'm selfish if I keep this, so it's my job. Like, I have a responsibility to whatever was given to me to hand it on to other people. So I'm just kind of like, I'm the guy in between, right? The games weren't really for me. They're just something that I was a conduit for them to come out. And so I got to carry that torch. So, and I do, you know, so, but I also do it in a way that I can meet people directly. So I do mostly direct sales, and that's why I come to conventions, because I want to meet people. I want to hear their story about, you know, like Burgle Bros always tells a story. Like, tell me about your craziest one. They always have a craziest time they played. So, so yeah. I don't know.
And a lot of your games seem clearly to be influenced by like classic heist films and spy films and things like that. Do you have like some favorite films that you'd point to? I'm just kind of curious.
Actually, Sneakers.
Oh yeah, that's a great movie. Robert Redford. Right?
Yeah, like that was one. I mean, people say Ocean's 11. I'm like, sure, Ocean's 11 is fun, but Sneakers.
Yeah. Does it? I'm curious. Have you watched it recently? Like, does it hold up?
I haven't watched it in a while. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't.
I always wonder that with movies, like, because I remember watching that as like probably in high school or middle school or something, and liking it a lot. But I'm like, would it hold up now? I don't know. But that was definitely one, and we've done some different homages. Like when we were playing an early version of Burgle 2, there was the Whistler was a character in it. But yeah. I mean, favorite movies. I mean, I like Primer, just because it's so twisty and I haven't seen that one.
It's hard to recommend.
Okay.
It's a really twisty time travel movie, and it takes about 2 or 3 viewings to even have an idea what's going on. Because it's self-consistent, but it's this loop, and then you watch it and again you're like, wait, that guy's from the end of the movie and he's back here now, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay. That sounds fun.
I mean, it's almost more fun after thinking about it.
Yeah.
Like the movie itself does not hold your hand.
Yeah.
It's not going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
So
I like that idea. That's cool. Well, thanks, Tim. This is great. Yeah. Thanks for your time. Yeah. Zain, where are you from?
I'm from Bombay in India. I traditionally make independent cinema, documentary films, virtual reality, and a bunch of other stuff. This is the first time I have gone into interactive and made a game.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my first convention ever.
Yeah. What made you decide to make a game?
So the studio I built, the idea was never to make a game or make a film or make anything. The idea was to tell stories that were compelling, exciting, and most importantly, urgent. I was part of a team that made a documentary about politics, and it took us 3.5 years to make. And those 3.5 years we spent following the major political parties of India.
Yeah.
And we were in closed door meetings with them. We were following the campaign very closely, so we knew exactly how politics functioned.
Yeah. What is that documentary called?
It's called An Insignificant Man.
Okay.
It's on YouTube if you can check it out. Vice International acquired it. After the documentary got over, I noticed this problem in the world around me, which was that had become super difficult for me to talk to my friends or my family about politics without it becoming toxic, without it becoming angry. And I wasn't the only one facing that. So I said, okay, if I were to spend some time trying to solve this problem, what would that look like? I knew that would look interactive, for sure.
Yeah.
If it was a YouTube video, it doesn't help. If it's a film, it doesn't help. You have to sit across and interact with each other. But should I make a digital game in a post Android and Nintendo Switch world? Should I make a digital game? But then the interface is physical to screen. It's not a human to human interface. And if screens could solve the problem, then Twitter would be the best place on earth.
Yeah.
So
there's some people feel some anonymity and maybe there's less accountability when it's just you and the screen.
Yeah, and less immersion, because the second you get a message or you get a email, the illusion breaks.
Yeah.
Now I've been gaming since I was 3 years old, and by gaming I mean everything from PC games to consoles to tabletop games, and that's a medium that is my medium of choice.
Yeah.
I consume more games than films and books combined. So I said, hey, why don't I go back to my favorite form and try something there?
Yeah.
This was Feb last year, and I started wondering if a political game were to be built, what would it look like? And it took me 18 months to build Shasan. Yeah, and I launched it. I was skeptical that politics would be picked up by the community as a genre, but surprisingly, it's done really well.
Yeah, that's great. That's cool. What is the reception of it then? Because I feel like in the States, in America, that's a huge problem. Like I feel like there's certain political things I can't talk about with my family because it's not safe to talk about those things, you know? So it sounds like you're making a game that's trying to break down some of those walls. Like, what kind of feedback have you gotten?
So the feedback has been like overwhelmingly positive. I have playtested the game over 1,000 times already, and I've had people get angry at each other, but at the same time talk to each other about things which they wouldn't have spoken about. I have had people who are complete strangers sit across the table from each other and discuss really important political issues while having fun. You know, the gameplay at the end of it can't be academic and boring. When you're playing a game, you want to have fun. And academic games only go so far. So while the intention was larger than just gameplay, I had to make sure the gameplay was fun. So I've had hours and hours and months of people laughing, screaming at each other, having fun and having a great time while discussing important issues. And I don't think there's anything more I could have asked for.
Yeah, that's great. That's very cool. It's cool. And if you had to narrow it down to one thing that you hope players get out of their experience, that they gain from their experience playing Shazin, what would it be?
Apart from the 2 hours of like nail-biting action, one thing that I wanted people to understand is what goes inside your representatives, your politicians' head when they say the things they say and they do the things they do. So when I put you in the politician's shoes for 2 hours, it's better than any classroom lecture or any film you could have watched, because you have been behaving like a politician for 2 hours. Yeah. The next time you turn the TV on and you see the politician saying something ridiculous or insightful or greedy, you know why they're saying that. You know what's going on inside their head. Yeah. And that's the takeaway I want people to have. And so far, it's translated really well.
Yeah. So like a greater awareness of how our political systems work and what's going on in the minds of...
Yeah. The smokes and mirrors of politics break and vanish while playing Shazin.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And so I guess we should have talked about this at the front end of the discussion, but kind of tell me how the game plays. Like, okay. What's the quick pitch of how the game works and how it plays?
So Shazin is a 3 to 5 player political strategy game where each player is a politician in the middle of an election campaign. Yeah. They gather resources, influence majorities, and try to capture as much territory as they can. But the core economic engine of the game is not a dice roll. It's not a card draw. It is sharing your opinion on a policy issue. That could be anything from an economic issue to a social issue to a racial issue. And depending on how you respond to the issue, you get resources. Yeah. And you use them to create influence, gerrymander voters, form coalitions, hatch up conspiracies, and dodge headlines, among other things.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I like the idea of it a lot. So, very cool. Well, one last question I like to ask designers is, why do you make games? I know this is your first one, but what drives you to do this?
Building up on what I said earlier, the idea is to create an experience where you believe that you are in the other world and you're taking decisions like another character, and no other medium can do that like games. I truly believe that games are the newest frontier and the future of all media. And the ability to role play while sitting across each other is something that's so powerful that nothing else can match it.
Great. Well, I enjoyed looking at it. I'm looking forward to trying it as well. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.